Um, Today we're going to be talking about coalitions, and I have with me Nicola Boss, who has also worked with coalitions a lot over the years, and she was very involved, if some of you might remember, the MAP program, which dealt with methamphetamine, and she worked with that coalition. So she's going to be talking a little bit too about the different coalitions. But before we get started, I'd like to have you, I didn't get to attend the SAPST conference, so I'd like to have you all tell me your name and then tell me like how many of you have ever been involved in a coalition or are currently involved with a coalition. So go ahead, Ben, can you start?
Did you say me?
Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Ben Severson. I'm the prevention coordinator here at USD. I take care of the Wellness Coalition. That's part of my position. And we define our community as the university. And
I lost you.
Okay, what I think I'm going to do, Vani and everyone, is I'm going to mute everyone else except the person who you call on. Will that work?
That'll work. Thank you. Go ahead, Ben. Ben? Okay. Ben?
I'm going to try unmuting him again.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm Ben Severson. I'm the prevention coordinator here at USD, University of South Dakota, and I run the Wellness Coalition, and we define our community as the university. And so we have lots of different people from different factions of the university. We have someone from Greek housing, someone from programming, someone from the SVRC, someone from ROTC, some different people that come and we discuss things and approach our coalition that way. And so I guess that's me.
And how long have you been in existence?
I took this position in December. I was kind of Michelle Turner's assistant prior to that. So, but this is really when I'm really learning how to do stuff on my own now. So all of this training is excellent.
Well, thank you. Okay, Betsy, can you unmute Betsy Doty, please?
I can.
Okay.
Betsy, are you there? Oh, Betsy doesn't have a microphone.
Okay, so she said she's a USD. Everybody can read that?
Okay.
Okay, Betsy, I'll let you just continue to type in if you have things. Okay, Cassidy?
Hello.
Hi, Cassidy.
Hi.
Can you tell
sorry.
Go ahead.
So I'm Cassie Betzinger. I work with our Redfield SAD chapter. I actually am part of a coalition, our Redfield coalition, and I work under the coalition coordinator. I'm kind of new to this. I've been working for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, but I haven't been doing it full time until just this last year. So I'm just kind of here to learn some more on what I can do for the coalition.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Gary?
Yes.
Okay, I know Gary is there with Colby Ebert also, and they're both from the Oyapi Coalition, but how long have you been involved, Gary?
I've been with the coalition for a couple years here in Rapid City at Youth Family Services, so I'm very happy to be a part of that.
Okay, thank you. And I know Colby is with him, so I hope all of you contribute, jump in anytime because of your involvement in coalitions. I know you'll have a lot to offer and to share with the rest of us. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we'll be talking about today, some of the coalition basics and why we have coalitions, different types, and then coalition building. We'll be talking about a mission and a vision statement and types of recruitment and diversity within your coalition. And then the maintaining of a coalition. This is probably one of the more difficult aspects of coalitions. to maintain it, have sustainability. And so we'll be talking about holding effective meetings and different types of recruitment, retention, any conflict management, capacity building, cultural competency, and any environmental types of change, like your...
Bonnie?
Yes.
We forgot one participant, and that is Casey Redden.
Sorry, I didn't see that name on my...
Okay, Casey now.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Casey Redden. I am with the Rural Sioux Empire Coalition for Youth. And that's with Carroll Institute. I've been here at Carroll for just over 2 years, but I haven't really been into the prevention program until just about a year ago.
Okay, well, thank you. Sorry I missed you. I'm having trouble seeing the participants on my sheet, and so your name didn't pop up, but thank you. Did I miss anybody else, Jody? Am I okay?
That was it. And so there was one question that came up where
Okay.
if you want to ask a question, I think you can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, what is a coalition?
Yeah, sure. This is Nicole. As Bonnie said, I have worked with her a lot on various coalition work here in the Prevention Resource Center. Also, for 7.5 years, I helped many communities in Western South Dakota with methamphetamine coalitions. So, coalition is basically it's a group of different community people and we'll talk more about the diversity of that group later on, but just getting community leaders, people with a stake in the problem together to achieve a common goal and work towards a solution to the problems. So coalitions are often set up around various issues and have different goals. Sometimes they're about public policy and advocating for some local law changes or statewide law changes. Sometimes they are specifically focused on affecting individual behavior change level, and overall they generally have a goal of achieving a healthy community, whichever strategies they use.
Okay, why we have coalitions? It's important that we have stakeholders, and we all have to be on the same page and even in the same book when we're talking about coalitions. Everybody has to speak the same language and move toward a common goal. So having a coalition could help elevate the impact of prevention programming by having all sectors of the community on board. For example, maybe a coalition might want to just reduce underage alcohol, and that's the reason that they get established.
Stakeholders generally in each community are going to vary, but you would think about who to include. It would be people that are affected by the specific problem. So if your underage drinking target, as Bonnie talked about, then that would be the youth or the parents or anyone that's affected by that problem. And then anyone who might have resources that they can contribute to the solution. And please think of resource, when you hear the word resource in our world, sometimes we think that means money. But think about resources in terms of time, free meeting location, whatever resources might be available that have influence, both formal and informal, because not always the formal leaders who are the greatest influencers, as we all know, and that represent the diverse sectors of the community.
Some of the advantages of community coalitions, it can help to increase the community's readiness for change. And here you have to collect and manage all of your community data, and this is extremely crucial. I know coalitions first, when I first became involved in a coalition, it was when we had the Drug-Free Schools program. And then it was usually just focused on one area. And now coalitions have expanded and evolved where they're focusing on way more than one area. So now it's more than underage drinking. And they're more effective at addressing environmental factors, and they're adapting new issues. And so that's part of the sustainability, is being able to adapt.
So when you bring people together, one of the great advantages is that everybody knows what everybody else is doing. In small communities, you might feel like they already do because it's so small, but getting into the really tiny details, they don't necessarily know all of the things that each other does in the community. And that's especially more true the larger the community. And so then you can reduce the amount of resources wasted or used and just make the best of it. And also it builds more collaboration instead of competition. Again, back to that resources and financial, sometimes different organizations unfortunately see each other as competing for the same grants and same funding sources and same foundations and whatnot. By bringing people together with different perspectives, they can fill in the gaps to figure out where services are lacking and then strategize together on how to meet those gaps, and then also again build support for the initiatives.
Okay, we're going to talk briefly about the different types of coalitions. And when I was first involved in a coalition, it was in the Meade School District. And at that time, the coalition focused pretty much just on one thing, which at that time was the Red Ribbon event. And so the coalition organized, got the community involved, and so that was probably the big prevention effort. And as many of you know now, Red Ribbon it's not considered an evidence-based program. I know a lot of communities still do it, and it is good as long as it's part of a comprehensive program that you have going, and it does bring the community on board. So many times we leave the community out, and that was something that the Red Ribbon campaign did. Also, a coalition can focus maybe on having health fairs, and this was more in the beginning when coalitions were getting started. Maybe they just had conferences or training or held poster contests. And so as all of you know now that you're involved in a coalition, you do much more than that.
And another type, and again, kind of an earlier type, would be one that focused more exclusively on specific program delivery. So this almost operates similar to kind of like a board, a guidance committee, something like that, just giving guidance on how we do specific programming or how we recruit more people into the programming and things like that. And often the staff would be, the coalition staff would also be involved in the programming stuff.
And so now we're seeing coalitions that are more community mobilized. They usually organize their communities around, or they were organizing around a single issue or a set of issues, such as those that are listed above. And Nicole can address the MAP, South Dakota Meth Coalition, that existed until June of 2011, and that's when the funding ran out. Some were suicide prevention coalitions. But now the coalitions that I take part in usually encompass all of those things, not only the underage drinking, but they also have maybe a subcommittee with the Suicide Prevention Coalition. They might have a subcommittee that's working on media or environmental issues like restricting the alcohol and tobacco billboards near schools. Maybe they're focusing on neighborhood watch groups. So they're doing a lot more. But as far as the Meth Coalition, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Meth coalitions look different in each community because each community that I worked in was different. But often they were.
Nicole,
Yeah.
can't hear you real well.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little further from the microphone than Bonnie. Sorry about that. But the Meth coalitions in each community looked slightly different based on the community. Sometimes they felt they had more of a lab problem and they needed to educate maybe retail stores on how to look for warning signs of what people are purchasing and whether they can stop the sale. And I worked a lot on reservations as well. And so in that case, they had to develop their own laws because they didn't follow state law. So as the state would change some laws, we would have to advocate with the tribes to see if they could get some education regarding the benefits of those types of policies. So sometimes it was about educating youth, sometimes it was about educating parents or the community at large, and it really just depended. Or some communities honestly were like, oh my gosh, we are having a problem. yes, we want to work on prevention, but we also want to work on educating people on how we deal with the consequences of the problem. So even within one small issue like methamphetamine, a coalition can go very different directions. And that, I think, for the next slide, leading into the more comprehensive coalitions that Bonnie was talking about that address multiple issues and respond to multiple needs, what's great is that these coalitions then can respond, and usually fairly quickly, to local community conditions, as opposed to federal grants that are saying, oh, there's a big opioid epidemic on the East and West Coast, and let's put money into opioids, which has only recently started to become a small problem, but it's still dwarfed by the methamphetamine problem. So by focusing on the community level in these comprehensive coalitions, we can more quickly respond to local needs and develop plans to address those things and lead to that population change that you can actually measure using the data that Bonnie was talking about.
So now some communities just let everything happen rather than being proactive. And so at this time, does anyone have anything they'd like to offer as far as any successes that you've seen in your community that resulted from coalition efforts? I don't know if, Doni, if you want, can you unmute, or do you unmute one at a time, or?
Well, they can unmute if they would like to talk. I think mute themselves, or they can type in a message.
Okay, so anytime you want to share, I'd love to hear about any successes that you might have had within your coalition, and or maybe some challenges that you might have had within your coalition, because we'll be talking about those a little bit later too. I'll let you think on that, and we can come back to it. But now I'm going to go into some of the coalitions that actually exist right now. And I know I've probably missed some. These are some of them are the ones we have in West River that we oversee out of the Western Prevention Resource Center. The ABC program in Sturgis has been very active for way more than 25 years. And they are involved in a great many things. They've expanded to being the go-to coalition in that community. And their meetings usually have 20 to 30 people. And they have recently now taken on daycare and childcare and offering after-school programs. So they've expanded into many things. They do diversion, they do the prevention. So that one has really grown over the years, as well as ASAP, which is.
So ASAP, used to be formerly known as the Adolescent Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, has been around also since the mid-'80s. A very old coalition addressing all kinds of things, initially with nothing but community support in terms of time. That was the main resource, was the community professionals involved in wanting to make a difference in the youth lives in Rapid City. And then after that, there came a period where they got the Drug Free Communities grant for 5 years and renewed again, and then had to shift into a significantly reduced funding and how to work with that, and looking at ways to go back to kind of being how it was in the beginning. And as state funding starts to wind down and wondering what's next, we may have to go back to more of the local community resources, which is sort of the way ASAP began in the beginning.
And then we have the Empower Coalition, which is out of Hot Springs, and they're active in that area in a lot of environmental issues. They work closely with the police department on compliance checks and that type of thing. The Oyate Coalition, and we have Colby and Gary on from Oyate. There again, it's an active coalition that recently received the Drug Free Communities grant. And they have programs every month. They do a lot of cultural things. And maybe if you want to add anything, Colby or Gary, about the coalition, we'd love to hear it.
I would just add, you asked about the the question previous. And one thing that's been very successful for the Oyate Coalition is the Native American Day celebration at Main Street Square in downtown Rapid City. I just found out today that we once again have been the recipients of funding for the event and through Main Street Square, and it's been well attended by the community, and we look forward to it to come for many years.
And that's a wonderful event, and it also enhances the evidence-based program that Oyate has, which is a life skills program for adolescents, Native Americans, that they do in various locations throughout the city of Rapid. Then we have the Lifeways, and Lifeways they're the school-based coalition in Rapid City, and you'll notice them further down. They do the Southern Hills prevention also in Custer. So Lifeways has 2 locations, and they're school-based. So their activities are providing evidence-based programs within the schools. They don't work as much in the community as such. And did you have anything you want to add about that?
I think one of their really cool events does involve the community quite a bit. They began with a photography contest. I actually worked at Lifeways for a little while, and they did a photography contest. I believe it was while I was there, it was the first time they did that. And they've now expanded it until it is a big art and interpretive dance event that's huge. They have an art show, and then they have, I believe the winning pieces of art are then given over to other young people who are dancers and performing artists, and they interpret a specific piece of art into some type of a dance or artistic performance, and then they have a performance-based event. And this is all ways that Lifeways was looking at how they can become sustainable as state and federal funding was being limited. They've gone to more local funding sources, as well as this huge fundraising event, which is quite empowering to the youth and gives them something positive to do besides turning to substance use. So it's been a very really fun and really good event for Lifeway.
Lemon Safe Communities Coalition, they're kind of a go-to coalition in Lemon. It's a small community, extremely active coalition. They go into the schools, they do the Lifeways evidence-based program, they have community training in various things. All of their programs each month are related to issues within the community, and they have had a lot of programs related to the meth use in the area. They're close to the North Dakota border, where the oil industry has had a big impact, and so that's an extremely active coalition. Then we have the Michael Glenn coalition in White River, and that's Joyce Glenn. She's very, very active again within the schools. She also has tobacco funding that she receives. She receives suicide prevention funding. She goes into the small communities around White River, like Wood and Norris. She has done a lot of town hall meetings in those communities related to meth and opioids. So that's a very active one. The Southern Hills, we mentioned, that's part of the Lifeways. The Spearfish Prevention Coalition, they do not receive state funding, but it's a very active coalition. They have the Drug-Free Communities Grant, and I think they're in their 8th or 9th year of that now. But they help out with, they have like a Wednesday night event every Wednesday in the summer. They do all of the ID identification to see if there are any youth getting into their beer gardens. And I don't know, it's just been an active coalition. The WHIP Coalition, Whatever It Takes, is over in Newell. That's Sabrina Harmon. And there again, she's very, very active, and that's kind of the go-to coalition for the community. She does everything from, she has a very active SAD group, Students Against Destructive Decisions. And they take part in fundraising to get the dental mobile into the community. They do a big prevention day every year where they bring in the police officers and have different programs. And then youth-wise, another school-based coalition out of Spearfish. So now we'll go into the ones in other parts of the state, and I'm not as familiar.
And Ben, thank you for giving information to everybody on the USD Wellness Coalition so that we can have that information as well. If anyone else wants to share, feel free. And I don't know, Jody and those of you who work with the Eastern Side coalitions, if you have anything you want to add, we'll just show the list. But if anybody has anything that they want to add on any of these, as Bonnie said, we're not as familiar with these. We don't work with these directly.
So I can talk a little bit about the Northeast Prevention Resource Center coalitions. For Aberdeen Roundtable Coalition, it's a little bit different in that basically what they do is they meet once a month, and there's a lot of community organizations that come around or come to the meeting, and basically what they're doing is they're sharing resources, they're sharing what they're seeing in regards to what youth are doing and what they're doing to address those issues. And basically it's basically just a time to share resources and data and what they're seeing within the community. But what they do, what Jeremy Atkins, the one that's in charge of that particular coalition or that funding, and he is in the Aberdeen School District doing project success with the high school and middle school there. And then East Central Behavioral Health is not a coalition. What they just receive funding for to do the diversion programming. So if a student is, or if somebody under the age of 21 is caught underage drinking or with drugs, then they will do the classes that they will have to go through. And then NSU Campus and Community Coalition, they do the CCAA, what is that? Community
Challenging College Alcohol Abuse, I think.
Thank you. That one.
ASAP does that one too out here.
Yeah. So they do a lot with social norming campaigns. So they'll do a survey, probably I think every other year. I noticed that Aaron's not on today, but every other year. And then they have a group of students called the Aware Wolves, and they put together social marketing information to raise the awareness that, you know, there's not that students aren't drinking at the levels that the perception is. So typically the perception is that everybody's drinking and everybody's drinking a lot, where really what students are reporting is that it's not as much as what the perception is. Alive Roberts County is one that has received a lot of grant funding. They were a DFC, Drug Free Communities recipient, gosh, I can't remember how many years ago now. And so they're addressing many issues up there as well. St. County Coalition is small but mighty, wouldn't you say that, Kathy? They do a lot of great things there. They're very diligent about meeting and making sure the needs are met within the community. If there's funding, like in regards to raising awareness on meth, opioids, tobacco, they're really gung-ho about pushing on and making sure that everyone's educated about that. They've hosted town hall meetings within the last few years that their numbers are phenomenal as far as when you consider that the number of people in that community and then the number of people that they probably get more than some of our largest communities in the state. So doing some good things in St. County. Watertown Health and Youth Coalition is probably the one that I'm the most familiar with because Kelly works just next door in the office. She's been coordinating that coalition for the past 20 years. They too will do town hall meetings and basically meet the needs of the community. They're ones that have become the go-to for resources. You know, if people have a question or if they see a gap in something programming with the community, They like to go to the Watertown Health Coalition to help to brainstorm and figure out what's going on, how can we address this issue to fill in the gaps that we're seeing. She also oversees the project school-based prevention program. And I was going to say too that, let's see, Aberdeen and Spring County also does project success as well within the school system. So that's what I know about Northeastern.
Okay, thank you, Jody.
Yep.
The Southeastern Prevention Resource Center, there are 6 of them there, and I see Ben's message there. I hope you can all see that. Where USD Wellness Coalition is focusing on college drinking, substance suicide, sexual assault. They helped organize alcohol talks that they provide for all freshmen. And they'll be adding a drug piece to it as well. So that sounds like an extremely active group. Anyone else want to add anything? There again, I'm not as familiar with some of those coalitions and the activities that they have.
Michelle decided to go on vacation for a week in the hills, so she couldn't be on today.
Okay. Well, I know she's a very busy gal, and they've got a lot of those are taking part in many of the opioid town hall meetings and the meth town hall meetings, and they all have evidence-based programs that they're working on. So there again, now we're going to look at coalition building and steps to build a successful coalition.
So initially, developing a unified platform is kind of in the process of getting everybody on board and working towards the same goals. That in part comes through developing a vision statement and a mission statement that everyone who is in that process can agree to, and then developing a plan to recruit new members as well as retain them once they're involved.
And developing the unified platform, they have to link with other issues that will sustain the movement in the community. And that's what we saw that many of the coalitions have done. They've gone with other issues. Alcohol is among a variety of issues that affects the community and the wellness in that community. The turf, the trust, the topic-specific approach can be a barrier to working more broadly. If some people want to just stay with the one topic, rather than to look at other issues, but everything overlaps, as we all know. And so this is one of the ways to sustain coalitions is to develop a unified platform.
Yeah, and by broadening that mission large enough to be inclusive of, if it's an alcohol-specific coalition, you may have a struggle to get some of the local organizations involved because they might know that alcohol affects their work, but they maybe can't justify putting the resources into that problem because it's not really their main focus of their mission. But if by talking about healthy youth and a healthy community, then that can encompass the things that all of them actually do.
And all of the coalitions that I've been involved with have developed a mission statement and a vision statement. And sometimes this mission is determined by the funding source. It might be to reduce underage drinking or some other mission. Some coalitions develop a much broader mission within which the funded mission and goals fit as part of the entire mission. But you have to look at what does the coalition want to accomplish, and how do you plan to accomplish it, and who's going to benefit. So I'm sure all of your organizations have a mission statement. And we're going to talk a little bit about developing the vision statement.
And the vision would be the kind of a place to start. And I love the the Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, then it doesn't matter which direction you go. So the vision is what helps the coalition know that they're continuing to go in the same direction that everyone has agreed to move within. Just a quick aside on an update there. Sounds like Ben is familiar with the Vermilion Prevention Coalition, and that this sustainability and keeping a coalition together is the biggest challenge. It sounds like there's been a lack of interest more recently, and now that's where you have kind of morphed into the Wellness Coalition, focusing specifically on the university community, and have more buy-in for that than there is for the community. So thank you for that update, Ben. But anyway, we're going to then go into how do we create the vision statement. And we haven't started on how to create a vision statement.
Hi, my name is Erica Olson. Welcome to today's whiteboard session on how to write a vision statement. Vision statements are a critical component to any great strategic plan. And the reason why is because strategic plans are about creating a different future. And that future is articulated in your vision statement. It needs to be succinct and clear and understandable, but it needs to paint a picture for where you're going and why. And that's your critical word to remember, is where. We often get mission and vision confused, so the way that you keep them distinct is by making sure that your vision statement articulates where. Where are we going? What does success look like in the future? Let's talk about the different types of vision statements, a checklist to make sure yours is great, and then we'll break down how it comes together and wrap it up with a quick how to do it for yourself. So there are 3 different types of vision statements that come in 3 different flavors, really. The first is quantitative. So a revenue number maybe, or maybe like a number of things. In this case, every kid, that's an expression of a quantitative vision statement. Competitive is about sounding like beating your competition or better than your competition. I don't see these very often, so I wouldn't use that. The third one is superlative, like premier, number 1, the best, also super common. Okay, here's your checklist. It's a great checklist to make sure that your vision statement truly is a vision statement. Let's break it down. Vision statements are at least 5 years in nature or longer. 5 years is a really good guide. In this case, by 2025. Future tense, I talked about that already. Make sure we say where. I love we envision. That's super future looking. And then of course we have the word will in there as well. So future tense verbs. It's directional. Again, we're not there today. Reaching every kid starts to explain that. Audacious, same deal. Every kid in our community, that's big. Visions are about big. And descriptive. Academically, through high school and beyond, it starts to paint a picture. We expanded it by adding some more descriptors here about how the world will look different. Remember, your vision statement is your North Star, and we want to be able to see that North Star. So let's create a clear picture. So let's break this down a little bit further so you can put yours together. We envision. I like to start vision statements like that because it gets us in the right frame of mind. You might get rid of it later, but it's a good place to start. The impact that we're making in the world. What is different? Be clear that you spell that out. And then what the world looks like. You may not always include these in all of your vision statement prints, if you will, but it's nice to really kind of describe it and not be constrained by something super, super tight and synthesized. The tip on these is I like to use these as a starting place to develop strategic objectives. It's a great way to tie everything together. So how do you create one? Well, you might already have an idea for your vision, in which case, get after it, write it down. If you don't, Google cover story vision, awesome instructions on pulling your team together and getting the creative juices going. So my last tip is leaders, focus on the future. You can't lead if you don't have a vision. So hopefully this helps you put yours together. That's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay. So that kind of gave you an overview of what a vision statement is. And I know all of the coalitions had to write a case statement where they had a vision and a mission. And I've suggested to all coalitions that they always put this on their agendas for each and every meeting. So it's at the bottom of the agenda page. So people can always refer to that and say, hey, does what we're doing fit into our mission? And visions are usually, it's a dream. So like a vision statement could be, we want to have a drug-free community. So that would, okay.
Or coming up.
Okay, right. So, okay, so it would, a vision statement would express the desired future things that you want. And it's something that's understood and it can be shared easily. So when somebody comes and asks you maybe what's your coalition all about, what's your vision for it, you'd be able to express it. Some sample vision statements here, like our communities united for drug-free youth, all youth in our community develop to their fullest potential, alcohol and drug-free, children in our county will grow up healthy and drug-free. So those are visions. Now turning this vision into a mission.
So the vision being the broad dream picture of what you want to achieve, a mission then gets into, well, what is our plan and the way that we're going to get there. Bonnie, could you talk about like clear my throat, please?
Okay. So some of the for turning it into a good mission, you have to be, we call it the SMART rule. You have to be specific with your mission. It has to be something you can measure. It has to be something that you can actually accomplish and attain. It has to be realistic, and you have to have a timeline. So when you look at your mission, to think of the SMART, S-M-A-R-T, and these are some of the things that you could look at.
So to keep the mission and the vision alive and really the focus, which is the purpose of them, you don't write them and then put them in a book on a shelf and never look at it again. As Bonnie said, keeping it on the agenda is a great way to do this, but also refer to it, especially if you're beginning to branch out into a new area and try something new. Go back to the vision and mission and see, does this really fit what we said we're going to do and what we're all about? If it is important, do we need to broaden our vision and mission? Or do we need to find another organization in town who does the same things? That would be more of a fit, and we can maybe suggest it to them. Strategic planning, as was referenced in the video, the goals and objectives should then be based upon the mission of the coalition to tie everything together. And in a way, this next one talks to the sustainability of the coalition and retaining members by getting new members on board, getting them buy-in to the mission by letting them know what those things are, so that they can get that passion and that motivation to stick with it and be along for that journey. And even specific activities should always keep that in mind as well.
And one other thing about mission statements, I'm going to read you one that one of the coalitions in West River has, and it's pretty lengthy, which I don't think it's necessary that a mission statement has to be this lengthy, but this particular one says that their mission is to promote social welfare, education, provide services beneficial to the public interest, including providing high school students and underage adults with opportunities to become or stay alcohol and drug-free through educational programs, alcohol, drug-free programs, and support and sponsorship of alcohol, tobacco, and drug-free activities. Now, to me, that's extremely lengthy, but it would be up to your coalition if that is something that you really want to put all of that into a mission statement. That's something that you're going to have to decide as coalition members. Now we're going to jump into how coalitions need diversity.
Yeah, I am all about diversity. I've lived in other countries. I was in the Peace Corps, all of my work on the reservations. In Southern California, I worked with a significant Latino population for a while in the Boys and Girls Club down there. And coalitions in particular can benefit from diversity because it gives us access to greater knowledge and brings more balance to decision making and planning. Greater impact as a result, and really if you're going to impact a specific population, knowing that population and having them at the table helps you to do so in a much better way. And the obvious type of diversity that most people think of right away when the subject of diversity comes up is, oh, we got to make sure we include our ethnic communities. You know, we need to include the Native Americans who live in Rapid City, the immigrant populations that live in Sioux Falls, you know, the foreign students on the campuses at the college coalitions, all of that. But in addition to that, think about different job sectors and who's represented or not. Different knowledge, skills, and abilities that different people bring to the table. Both male and female, LGBT communities, various other gender diversity is important. Socioeconomic background diversity is important, family status, and age as well.
Yes, I think it's important to remember you need youth on your coalition, and this is sometimes very hard. And we have found it a very difficult thing just because of the meeting time, where a lot of youth can't get out of school to attend. Some schools I know allow students to go and they get extra credit. They do this in Sturgis, where the teacher who has a class during that particular time allows 2 or 3 students to always attend the coalition meeting and be part of it. So, I mean, it's something you can work around to try to get youth involved. And even if they can't attend, maybe you could have them on a committee that could maybe meet at some other time that's convenient. But any type of diversity will strengthen your coalition.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to add too on the youth perspective at the table is that often coalitions will simply tokenize youth, and they'll just have 1 or 2 youth that they invite to meetings just so they can say they have youth representation. They don't necessarily listen to or value the viewpoints of the youth. They don't make space for that youth to be heard, and they say, oh, this is a great plan, this will be great for the youth. Don't you think so? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. And they're not really comfortable or empowered to actually speak up and say, no, this would actually reach us in a much more profound way.
I really like this little graphic of the shoe test. You should always look under the table at the different shoes, and you can see a lot about the diversity of your group by seeing the shoes that they wear. And we had a director for the prevention program in Pierre several years ago who came up with this, and I like it. If you can include people, I know the Oyate Coalition has a bar owner on their coalition, which is wonderful because we get the perspective there of someone who is actually dealing with underage youth and false IDs. And so it's nice to get someone in the alcohol industry to be part of your coalition.
Yeah, a lot of times people would consider they're the enemy. We don't want them there, but they really can be a strong ally. They don't want underage drinking. They want responsible adult drinking, and they can be a great ally and have some information and perspective that otherwise is lacking.
And so it's extremely important to remember that you should have some representation from each of the 12 different sectors, they're called, and on your coalition. And so we've listed these here. If you could have someone from youth, parents, the business community, the media, someone from the schools, someone from youth serving organizations such as Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Club, someone from law enforcement, religious or fraternal organizations, someone from the faith-based community, civic and volunteer groups, healthcare professionals, state, local, or tribal government, and someone that might have expertise in the field of substance abuse, and then other organizations that are involved in reducing substance abuse, such as Lutheran Social Services, Catholic Social Services, behavior management. So do any of you have any trouble, or does anyone have any comments to make on if you are able to get people from different areas on your coalition or as part of it, or at least to maybe not attend every meeting, but if they're available for you to call on?
And if anyone has any thoughts on maybe which sectors might be the more challenging to get involved, and maybe if they have been able to do so, how they were able to overcome those challenges. I think of medical professionals in particular as being sometimes very difficult to get involved. Yeah, if anyone has anything to share, feel free.
Some areas, maybe get the school health nurse to represent that sector. We've had some with faith-based organizations. If it's a larger community and they might have a ministerial association, they get someone from that ministerial association to come to the meeting. And sometimes it's difficult, but usually I know at some coalition meetings I go to, they have 3 or 4 police officers at the meeting. In some of the small towns, a lot of people wear a lot of different hats. They might be someone who's with the fire department, the EMT, the chief of police. So you might get somebody that represents all of those areas.
I know in Watertown, we've always had like the medical community involved until a couple of years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, when we decided to do a suicide prevention walk. And there's a doctor in town here who's very passionate about running. And so because he's passionate about that, because he's passionate now about the topic of suicide, we've really engaged the medical community on that aspect of our prevention programming.
See, that's good. And like a pharmacist, maybe you could get a pharmacist that could attend a meeting. I'm trying to think of, or someone from the physical therapy aspect. So there are a lot of different ways you can look at that. Maybe a school nurse. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of, you have to kind of think outside the box sometimes.
I know that Watertown did the opioid town hall meeting. We had a hospital pharmacist as one of the panel members.
Oh, great.
And so since then, she's been pretty engaged in what we're doing as well.
Yeah, because inviting someone to be an expert in their field to one event exposes them to the coalition in a broader sense, and that does sometimes work. I've seen that as well.
Right. And some of the skills that you might need to look for when you're getting coalition sectors and members are maybe they have access to resources. Maybe they are good with policy changing or decision making efforts. So look at some of the skills of the people that you have and the types of people that you might need. You need idea people. You need people that are good with money. You need people that are great organizers. Then you also need those cheerleaders and motivators. You need planners. So not everybody is going to be doing everything. Some people might just want to be like part of a think tank and be an idea person, but not really want to carry out everything, where you might have other ones that like to do.
And those who can analyze your data.
Yes.
And that's something a lot of us don't really like to do, but we understand that it's important to show people that we might ask resources or funding to our organizations or our coalitions that we need to show them. But if you don't like that, then bringing someone to that. And I know of a coalition that, and I don't remember if we have a specific slide to address structure. Some have a board of directors in addition to a coalition. But one coalition who does have both of those has the coalition and the board of directors. And that does become important if it becomes an independent 501c3, then it's a requirement to have the separate board. But a board that has an attorney on it and a realtor and an accountant, and it has basically all of the things of the business of the coalition that a board of directors needs to do, because that's where the difference is. The board is to do the business decisions and the financial and the direction and that, and then the coalition is more of the work of the coalition and bringing people together. So,
and I kind of like this graphic. It's more on with diversity. It's a lot easier to look at different ways to solve problems. So I just think it's kind of cute, the ways they chose to solve a problem they had. Okay, here we are. If anyone wants to share anything about having a diverse team and how maybe that's helped your coalition be more innovative or have a greater impact, we'd love to have you either type something out or share it.
Bonnie, I'd like to share that the Oyate Coalition has recently had billboards up talking about, marijuana and alcohol throughout the summer. And so that's something new, and that came from a diverse group of people who met in addition to the monthly meetings. They met after the monthly meetings and became like a media subgroup.
Yeah, that was wonderful, and there have been a lot of comments on those. And I know We looked into that. I know Oyate looked into that to see how effective billboards were. And we were told that as long as it's part of a comprehensive overall prevention program, and also if there was some way you can kind of do a evaluation of the effectiveness of the billboards. And so it was suggested by the CAPCA officials that if you could sometimes talk to your group about what kind of billboards would they like to see, or how often do they see them, what locations do they drive by the most. And then after a billboard is up for a while, do an evaluation. Just say, okay, how many of you saw the billboard and where did you see it? Have you had any comments? I know one that the Oyate Coalition put up was on Don't Let Your Summer Go to Pot. And it had a marijuana leaf with the slash through it. And there have been a lot of comments on that one. So I think it is something that could be effective. Depends on your group. Maintaining a coalition. Okay, this is probably one of the harder things that's to do and to keep people active and coming to your coalition. So we'll be covering each of these areas as we go through it, but how to have effective meetings, communication plan, conflict management, cultural competency. So we'll be talking about each one of these areas.
When it comes to making sure your meetings are more effective, be continually looking at recruitment and determining who should be at the table, who's not there, what sectors or skills are missing. Having a suitable room, the right equipment, just making it comfortable, and having a very clear agenda, purpose, and outcomes for each meeting so that everyone knows what the point is of the meeting. Nobody wants to go to meetings just for the sake of having another meeting. We've all got plenty of those. And then a heads up ahead of time of anything that you want people to bring, or ideas or things that you want them to think about ahead of time, so that the time spent together can be more effectively used.
Right, and I think it's important that the coalition meeting, it's nice to have a regular meeting date and a regular meeting place, like the third Wednesday of every month at 11:30, or the second Tuesday of every month. Because some coalitions who tend to say, well, we're going to have a meeting this Friday, and then the next month, well, we're going to have it on Tuesday. They're not as effective because people can't write this in their calendars and depend that that's going to be a meeting day. So we have found that that's an important point. Also, I know food always brings people out. And so I know a lot of coalitions make it their noon time. Maybe they have their meeting at 11:30 and have a lunch, and then a lot of people will come, eat, have the program, take part in the meeting, and then if there are subcommittees, they meet at different times. And like Nicole said, they have to know the value of the meeting and why they're attending. And it's always good to have an agenda. I know most of the coalition meetings that I go to, at the bottom of their agenda, they always have a little point that says community concerns. So then people can ask questions or talk about something that maybe isn't on the agenda that they're concerned about. And I think that's important, because a lot of people, and it's important to go around the room at every meeting and have everybody maybe tell what they've been doing within their agency or in the community. People want to let you know what's happening, and it gives everybody an opportunity to speak instead of just sitting there as part of the meeting.
Yeah, some things when it comes to effective meetings sound like common sense, but I see far too often that it doesn't happen. Starting on time and ending on time. It's like, oh wait, we only have 3 people here. Let's wait and see who shows up. Well, then that becomes it's easy for that to then become a pattern, because they're not going to start until quarter after anyway, and people just progressively become later and later, and it gets frustrating to those who are on time. And they have plans to be somewhere else afterwards. Sticking to the agenda and having room for adapting that agenda with that community input at the bottom is great. And I think Bonnie pretty much already addressed the other things at the bottom there.
Right. Also, having little subcommittees, I think, is very helpful within a coalition. if you have a group that maybe wants to work on fundraising, or maybe there's a couple people who are really great at collecting data, and they know exactly where to go to get data that you might need, such as the hospital, if you need to get any information from the medical area, or maybe they know how to get information from law enforcement. So you might have somebody like that. Maybe you have somebody that wants to do the minutes. Maybe you don't really have officers, but you might have somebody within the coalition that would really like to take care of that portion. Membership recruitment. It's nice. I've been to coalition meetings where they maybe have a little flyer or a fold out where it tells what the coalition's all about. They can give it to new members. They have new member packets. They assign one of the old members to sort of mentor that new person. So I think all of these are valuable in maintaining a coalition. And it was recently brought to our attention that some coalitions send out postcards as reminders for people about a coalition meeting rather than doing emails, because they said a lot of people tend to get overwhelmed with emails and just say, oh yeah, this one came from so-and-so, and so they don't take a look at it. But if you have somebody within the coalition that maybe would like to send out postcards, just as little reminders.
And whether they're all subcommittees or just letting one person who has a passion for a specific aspect, empowering them to run with it, engages them more and helps them feel that their skills are really being of value to the coalition, and that's what's going to get them coming back and sticking around.
And now your meetings, you might find somebody who's, if you just say, would anybody like to take the minutes at this meeting? And you might have somebody that offers to do it. And then at the next meeting, get somebody else. Sometimes people don't like to sign on for a lifetime commitment. And so maybe they're willing to help once or twice, but they don't want to say, oh yeah, I'm the permanent secretary, because then you might lose them. It's good to send out the minutes. I know I've heard this from a lot of coalitions, that if they mail out their, excuse me, their minutes or email them to the members, and that way the ones that didn't make it can say, oh my gosh, I missed that program, and that looked like it was an important meeting I should have gone to. So I think it is important to send out minutes if you have them.
So if you can have this good process and the good facilitation skills, this helps to make sure that everybody stays on the same page and understands each other, stays focused, that it's a productive meeting. And so a lot of this is about the facilitator, making sure that everyone gets called on, noticing the room, reading the room, looking for someone who may have some nonverbals that show they want to say something, but maybe they're not speaking up, and just asking if they have something that they'd like to add. Sometimes this comes into areas of conflict that people really don't like to bring out in the open, but if one person, you notice that body language that says that they've got an opinion to share that differs from the group, and if you don't draw them out, you may just end up having that person silently walking away because they disagree with where the group is going, but their insight could be very valuable. And even if it doesn't go in their direction, at least if they feel that the coalition is willing to hear all the perspectives, even if it's potentially a conflict area, that is more likely to keep people engaged, as long as that is handled well. And that does take sometimes a strong facilitator and a set of skills to do all of that.
And I have gone to some coalition meetings where on their agenda they actually have timelines. So maybe they'll have old business and then they'll have different things listed, but they'll put down that that's going to take place from 11:45 to 11:55. And so that way it keeps things moving along. And if it's something that needs a lot of discussion, it might have to be continued at the next meeting, but it keeps the whole communication process and everything on track. This, I'll mention the credit or thanks needs to be communicated. I think a lot of coalitions forget this, to show appreciation to not only their members, but to people in the community who have maybe done something special. And so does that need to be communicated?
Yeah, and in terms of the communication, and this is again using people's individual skills. If you have a media person on your coalition as a sector that's represented, this person would ideally be great at helping the coalition get its message out there. Maybe this is just one person so that the coalition doesn't have a different message everywhere it goes. I remember when I was at MAP South Dakota, every coalition coordinator was kind of even using a different logo, not to represent the coalition, but to represent MAP South Dakota and their coalition. And so the messages weren't always consistent. So they had brought in someone to take the statewide organization, sort of the coalition of coalitions, and get a consistency of that. So having one person be the spokesperson can help with that consistency. Otherwise, if you have a committee or a person who is comfortable in front of a camera for media interviews, for example, that's all great, but then it becomes important to say, okay, whoever is potentially a voice of the coalition needs to have the message and be on the same page and speaking the same voice.
Right, and I've been in coalitions where they get invited a lot of times to speak to different clubs or organizations like Kiwanis or Optimists and talk about the coalition and what it does or something they're involved in. And so it's nice to have a couple people within the coalition who like to do that and who like to go in front of a group and talk about it, or maybe they've developed a PowerPoint of the different activities and programs that the coalition has done over the year, and it's something that they can show at these programs, but that way it gets the word out in the community. So I've seen that to be very effective. It doesn't always have to be the facilitator. It should be members of the coalition that are actually out and about. And the next part is on volunteer and member recruitment, and always consider our sectors, who you know in each of those, and always try to keep somebody from all of those sectors within your coalition. Have a time when each member invites new potential members. Do you get media coverage? Now I know in some of the small communities that still have a newspaper, they get the newspaper to actually publish their minutes or to put in a little reminder about the upcoming meeting. I know that doesn't happen in some of the larger communities, and I know newspapers are kind of on their way out, but it's something that could be done. The best way to recruit people is sometimes just a face-to-face invitation and share what your coalition wants to accomplish. We have what we call an elevator speech. It's something that you could tell somebody in just a few minutes. What does your coalition do? What are you about?
So openness is, of course, really important. People want to know that if they want access to certain information, that it's available to them. They don't want things to be hidden. Oh, you know, only this inner circle gets access to this specific information or whatever. Avoiding secrecy, defensiveness, conflict. A conflict is inevitable, but being open to handling it and not, okay, well, we have this conflict, we're going to handle it behind closed doors, and then we're not going to let everybody know kind of the resolution of that. It's hard to show that ugly side sometimes, but by trying to hide it, it can create this feeling of ick, I guess. And sharing leadership and kind of grooming new people to rise up to take leadership of the coalition. I think it's great. I think it was Ben talked about coming up from being sort of an assistant and now leading the group. And I think if you're not continually thinking about where the future leadership might be or grooming people into greater and greater participation in higher roles, if somebody ends up, their spouse gets a job in another community and they end up leaving and there's no one that's been available and kind of moving up the ranks and getting more knowledge and information and skills, the coalition has to kind of start over.
Yeah, and that's so true, because in some of the small communities, if it's the director of the coalition or the facilitator who's sort of doing everything, and then if that person leaves, then the coalition folds. And so I think it's always good to have somebody that you're grooming, and you're 2 or 3 people that are always able to step in. It's important to meet people where they're at. If somebody is invited to your coalition and maybe they're interested in just one thing in the coalition's work, So that could be on the agenda. Maybe they're interested in just working on a fundraiser. So kind of go with what your coalition members want in order to retain their involvement. It's important that you always orient the new members and put them to work as quickly as possible in an area that they're interested in. Do you have a new member packet? Give it to new people, information about your coalition, what your purpose is, what your vision is, the meeting time, the dates, the contact person, name, phone number. Always ask for feedback. I know one coalition, actually, after every meeting, they hand out an evaluation. They want people to evaluate how the meeting went, what they think of the program. Did they feel like they were able to contribute? Did they get enough time? So yeah, one coalition out here does that after every meeting. They do an evaluation. So it's important to retain your staff and your volunteers. And what I like here is celebrate your victories. So many coalitions do so many things that nobody knows about, and I think it's important to pat yourself on the back and let the community know what's happening. If you can, get some pictures taken. Kind of have an open house where you actually invite new people in the community to come. Okay, does anyone have anything you'd like to share about how you've recruited or retained members? I know we're kind of running out of time, so we have a ways to go here, so we might have to speed it up. Does anybody have any comments you'd like to make? The potential areas for conflict, I don't know. Sometimes within a coalition, you might meet some resistance about things, and Nicole mentioned something like this where where there might be different strategies or ways of doing things. So you have to always create opportunities for involvement and identify the leaders in the coalition. So those are areas. Does anybody have any experience where you might have had some conflict and within a coalition where there was some disagreement? Reasons to resolve it will naturally, you don't want your coalition to just fold up, and sometimes coalitions have done this because if there was conflict within the coalition, or if they had one person who maybe was very outspoken and wanted to take over everything. I was involved in a coalition like this where they had one person that they had to actually ask her not to come anymore to the meetings. Maybe you remember that, Nicole, a few years ago. Anyway, so there are different ways to manage conflict.
You know, and a big important part of it is, you know, listening and making sure that all perspectives are heard with respect and empathy. If a person is respectfully sharing their opinion and it's accepted and empathized with, that can go a long way. If a person is not sharing it respectfully, then figuring out ways to manage that as well. Clarifying what everybody wants and everybody's opinions on both or all sides, not always just two-sided, and find the common ground. If you really are looking at, we're fighting over this issue, there was a case that at a training I was at, they were talking about, they were brought in to do sort of a mediation and find some common ground between two groups, and they didn't know the groups that they were supposed to get the common ground on until they walked into the room. And here they found out that it was pro-life people and pro-choice people. And they're like, well, what the heck can I find here that's going to be common ground? These are very polar opposites. And sat down with them and found that when they both shared what their goals really were, go ahead and click to the next slide, Bonnie, they were able to make the pie bigger. So that rather than saying, okay, we need to cut this pie into smaller and smaller pieces so we all get what we want, they could agree to a common goal of let's reduce teenage pregnancies. That would potentially reduce the need for anyone to seek abortions, or not even underage, but even just unintended or unwanted pregnancies among adults as well. So they could both agree to that goal. So that just expanded the pie. Now they could both pool their resources into those types of activities.
Oh, that was a win-win. So that was good. Capacity building and training. Here again, pay attention to your diversity. And it's important to provide training within a coalition. And I know a lot of coalitions do this, where they have provided the mental health first aid training for all of their coalition members. They've provided cultural diversity training for their members. So I know this is important, bringing somebody who's going to update them. A lot of times law enforcement will come in and update everyone on the different drug trends within the community. But there are a lot of ways you can constantly train and update your people. Back to our cultural competency again. And this, I know you have a lot of this within the SAPST training, but this is another important thing. Our environmental change, this is some things, a lot of coalitions are working on environmental change.
And it's referred to as moving upstream, because instead of just, I think the example that's often given is if there's, dead bodies floating down a river, and or not even dead bodies, maybe just people floating down the river and drowning, and someone's just pulling them out from the side and not understanding why they're falling into the river in the first place. Going upstream is what is the source of the problem? Where are these people falling into the water, and how can we prevent them from falling in the water in the first place? So rather than addressing the substance use problem and trying to treat all of the people who are experiencing the addictions, finding ways to move up and what is the actual reason why this is happening. And the environment isn't always what we think it is. This little lighthearted take on the Pavlov from the dog's perspective, where Pavlov obviously thinks he's learning something, but the dog has a different perspective on what's going on in that environment.
Okay, and changing the environment, it can be done through policy development or advocating or outreach through the media or social norms. And I know you have a copy of the PowerPoint, and so we're going to kind of rush through these. But ways policy development can be addressed, including your local, state, or federal laws, providing long-standing solutions, address problems that were the reason for the need for change. The section on advocacy, your coalition can speak or write in support of certain issues or causes and can motivate others. This could include petitions, legislation, but here, use caution. And that's our next slide. It's important to know the difference between advocating and educating versus lobbying. And I know in many coalitions we've had a whole program to address this, so they know the difference. You can advocate for issues. It's okay to provide education to the community, but you are not allowed to say, well, yes, on some major. Okay, media. I know a couple coalitions have someone from the media, and they can spread your message, change the environment, provide positive messages, and they can share data, some of your statistics that you collect. Social norming.
So social norming is, I think it was referenced just a little bit earlier, but on some of the coalitions that Dodie's working with, that they look at what the individual use is versus what the perception of the use is. So you have to start with surveying to know what people report for their own use and what they think other people are using. So they might report that everyone uses except me. And then you find out that there's a lot more except me's than you thought. So you compare the actual use versus the perception, and then you start letting people know the real information and the accurate data based on the surveying. And then you assess again and do the surveying over again and see if the perception's changed.
Here are the resources more on social norming that you can check out. These are some of the evidence-based programs that you can look at if you're not familiar with those. These are some of the programs used by the South Dakota coalitions, and we've mentioned some of these already. And okay, now sharing time. If anyone has anything that you'd like to share about any environmental strategies that you might have used or some of your main challenges and successes, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, moving toward the evidence base, it has been a challenge for a lot of people. They're like, well, I just know that it works because it feels good. But that doesn't end up with the data to back it up, and then it becomes harder and harder to sustain without the funding. Now, some organizations, as I mentioned, or coalitions opt to become an independent 501c3. Benefits of that, obviously, the tax exempt status and being able to maybe do sales tax exempt as well. It provides less liability for members, staff, or board of directors. Grants, you don't need to find a partner organization to be a fiscal agent for those. And then the existence, if one person leaves, the board and the coalition is still that independent nonprofit that has the ability to function and continue on afterwards. And it also gives your coalition an opportunity or a measure of independence without having to have a fiscal agent. But now some of the reasons I know that a lot of coalitions do not go after a 501 is because it is expensive. They have filing fees, they have staff and coalition members may become preoccupied with maintaining all of the paperwork. So those are just the pros and cons. And if you want more information on this, you can sure contact me, because there are a lot of coalitions in this area that are 501c3s, and then some have chosen not to be, and they're still under fiscal agents. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about those if you want to give me a call. We just put these in at the end, and yeah, I put these slides together based on the data that shows that if you do use effective and evidence-based programming for prevention, but beginning with how much do we actually in our nation and in our state put into prevention? Nationwide, state and federal government spend about 90, for basically every dollar. It doesn't even talk about what percentage of the money is spent towards substance use issues, but of the money that is actually spent on substance use and addiction issues, 96% or 96% or 96 cents of every dollar goes towards dealing with the consequences. So your law enforcement and your jails and your diversion programs and all of those kind of things, dealing with the consequences, child protection, all of that. 2 cents goes towards prevention and treatment, and then 2 cents goes towards research and taxation and regulation, and it kind of just like the logistical details of managing that. The next slide then goes into that. If you use evidence-based programming, $1 into proven efforts that actually have been shown to make a difference can actually save $10. So when people think, oh, budgets are tight, let's cut prevention, they're actually going and pushing themselves into a position where they're spending more down the road, which is actually sort of what happened with the meth coalitions that I used to be involved with. We thought we had kind of, as a state, that we had solved that problem. It had kind of been reduced for a while, even though it had started creeping back up before the funding was cut. Taxes were low, revenues were low for the state, and they cut the funds to that program. And now many of you are very aware of where we're at with methamphetamine nowadays, and it's much more expensive. So just envision if we took that 96 cents that's already spent on substance use issues, took 3 more pennies of every dollar and put them into prevention instead. So we're now spending a nickel, 5 cents of every dollar, and if that $1 leading to $10 savings is 1 penny leading to 10 pennies of savings, we will then save 30 cents in the consequences. So an additional 27 cents per dollar would be available for every dollar that we've spent into prevention or into dealing with the issue of alcohol and substance use. That can be used for, of course, education, highways, infrastructure, law enforcement, tax cuts. I mean, you name it, that is a huge benefit to all of us.
Okay, so this concludes our PowerPoint on coalitions, but I'd like to just share with you some additional resources, and those you all have on the copy of the PowerPoint. One that's very, very good is that capacity primer that we have, and it's put out by CADCA, and so that one you might want to take a look at, and those you can order for no cost. And you can contact any of the prevention resource centers at any time, and we'd be happy to help you with your coalition efforts. So you've got our phone numbers there. So that concludes our program, and I really appreciate your sticking with us and taking time. And if you have any questions, just call any of us. Thank you so much.
Before we end, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much for taking part.
Okay, so next week we will have ACEs and resiliencies. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. We'll have Shelley Fuller as our guest speaker. She is prevention out of community counseling in Huron. She's become very passionate about resiliency and about being an advocate for students. And so I think you'll find the webinar to be very enjoyable. So I will send out the on that probably next week. And in the meantime, have a great weekend.